Max Holloway's stomach growled as he stepped into the bustling cafeteria of Galactic Academy, the most prestigious interspecies educational institution in the Orion Arm. The air smelled of strange spices and biochemical food compounds designed to accommodate the diverse digestive systems of students from 17 different planets. "Just find a seat and act normal," Max muttered to himself, clutching his plain metal lunchbox. Being the only human in his class was challenging enough without drawing attention at mealtime. The exchange program that brought him to this space station was supposed to foster interspecies understanding, but mostly it made him feel like a biological oddity. He spotted an empty spot at a table occupied by 3 Zorlaxians, tall, blue-skinned humanoids with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern and a neptilian with glistening scales. The cafeteria hummed with chatter in multiple languages, the universal translators embedded behind everyone's ears working overtime. "Mind if I join you?" Max asked, forcing a smile. The Zorlaxian named Vex looked up, all 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "The human wants to eat with us. How quaint." His translator rendered his clicking speech into flawless English, but couldn't hide the condescension. "Sure," said Krill, the Neptilian, moving his books to make space. "We were just discussing quantum physics." Max set down his lunchbox and sat. The metal container looked painfully outdated compared to the hovering food trays and nutrient dispensers his classmates used. It was his mother's idea, something familiar from home to help with the homesickness that came with being billions of miles from Earth. "What is that primitive container?" asked Lorne, another Zorlaxian, pointing a slender blue finger at Max's lunchbox. "It's called a lunchbox," Max explained, opening the latches. "We use them on Earth to carry food." "How charmingly prehistoric," Vex said, his mouth parts twitching in what passed for a smirk among his species. "Do you also carry a club to hunt your food?" The aliens at the table laughed, their various sounds of amusement creating a strange chorus. Max felt his face grow hot but tried to ignore it as he opened his lunchbox. Inside were several carefully packed items, a sandwich, some fruit, and a special compartment containing 6 raw eggs still in their shells. "By the stars!" gasped Triz, the 3rd Zorlaxian. "What are those spherical objects? They look like Krill's cousin's spawn pods." Krill's scales rippled with indignation. "They do not." "They're chicken eggs," Max explained, taking one out. The egg felt cool and smooth in his hand. "You brought reproductive modules for lunch?" Vex asked, his voice rising in pitch. "Even for a human, that seems barbaric." The mockery was becoming too much. Max had endured weeks of subtle jabs about human biology, physiology, and culture. The eggs were actually part of his high-protein diet, recommended by the school physician to help his body cope with the slightly higher gravity on the station. But explaining that would only invite more ridicule. Instead, Max did something impulsive. He cracked the egg on the edge of the table and quickly separated the shell, allowing the clear albumin and yellow yolk to pour directly into his mouth. He swallowed it in one gulp, maintaining eye contact with Vex the entire time. The table fell silent. Even nearby alien students stopped their conversations to stare. What did you just do?" Triz whispered, all 4 eyes wide with shock. Max reached for another egg. "Having lunch." He cracked it and drank it just like the first, feeling a small sense of satisfaction at their horrified expressions. Vex's blue skin paled to a lighter shade. "You consume them raw? Without cooking?" "Sometimes," Max said, reaching for a 3rd egg. In truth, he rarely ate them this way, but their reactions were too priceless to stop now. But the potential pathogens. Krill's scales were now shifting through various shades of green, which Max had learned indicated distress. Max shrugged, downing the 3rd egg. "Human stomachs are pretty tough. We evolved as omnivores who could eat almost anything." This was only partially true. Salmonella was still a concern on Earth, but these eggs had been specially treated for space travel to eliminate any risks. Word was spreading through the cafeteria. Students from different species were gathering around, forming a circle of curious and disgusted onlookers. Max felt a strange power in this moment, turning the tables on those who had been mocking him for weeks. "Is it true humans can digest almost anything?" asked a small, fuzzy Arcturian with large ears. "Not everything, but more than most species," Max replied, now warming to his audience. "Our ancestors had to survive by eating whatever they could find." A tall, thin Solarian with luminescent skin stepped forward. "I heard humans deliberately consume fermented food that contains living microorganisms. Is this true?" Max nodded. "We call it yogurt or kombucha or kimchi, depending on what it's made from. The bacteria are good for our digestion." Murmurs of amazement and disgust rippled through the crowd. Max cracked another egg and drank it, playing up the performance now. "Does your species do this often?" Vex asked. His tone changed from mockery to genuine curiosity. "Mostly athletes and bodybuilders," Max explained. "The protein helps build muscle." A loud voice cut through the crowd. "What's happening here?" The gathering parted to reveal Professor Zaltar, the evolutionary biology teacher. His species resembled a cross between an octopus and a giraffe, with a long neck supporting a bulbous head ringed with tentacles. "Just sharing some human dietary customs, Professor," Max said, suddenly feeling less confident. Professor Zaltar moved closer, his many eyes focusing on the eggs. "Ah, I see. Unfertilized avian reproductive capsules, rich in proteins and lipids. A sensible choice for a human in this gravity." Max felt validated by the scientific explanation. "That's exactly why I brought them." The professor turned to address the gathered students. "This is an excellent opportunity for a spontaneous lesson. Different species evolve different digestive capabilities based on their home environments. Humans come from a planet with remarkable biodiversity, which pushed them to develop extremely adaptable digestive systems." The professor's tentacles gestured enthusiastically. "For instance, no Zorlaxian could consume raw avian products without experiencing severe gastric distress due to their silicate-based digestive enzymes. Similarly, a human would be poisoned by the methane compounds Arcturians consider delicacies." The students were now paying rapt attention, their earlier mockery replaced by scientific interest. "However," Professor Zaltar continued, "I must caution you, Mr. Holloway, that performing for your classmates by consuming multiple raw eggs might exceed even your species' considerable digestive capabilities." Max suddenly felt less triumphant. The professor was right. 4 raw eggs in quick succession was probably pushing it, even with the antimicrobial treatments. "Yes, Professor," Max acknowledged, closing his lunchbox. "Now, why doesn't everyone return to their meals, perhaps with a new appreciation for xenobiological diversity?" The professor's voice was gentle but firm. As the crowd dispersed, Vex turned to Max. "I apologize for my earlier comments. It was ignorant of me to mock your cultural practices." Max was surprised by the apology. "It's okay. I probably shouldn't have made such a show of it." "Perhaps we could all share something about our nutritional customs," suggested Krill, his scales returning to their normal blue-green hue. "Cultural exchange was the point of this academy, was it not?" Max smiled, feeling a genuine connection forming. "I'd like that." That afternoon in xenobiology class, Max's stomach began to churn uncomfortably. Despite the eggs being treated for space travel, consuming 4 raw ones in quick succession had been a mistake. By the time the class ended, he was sweating and his vision was blurring at the edges. "Are you well, Max?" Vex asked as they gathered their study materials. "Your epidermal coloration has changed significantly." "I'm fine," Max lied, gripping the edge of his desk. "Just need some water." Professor Zoltar slithered over, his tentacles waving with concern. "Mr. Holloway, you are exhibiting signs of distress. Perhaps you should visit the medical bay." Max nodded weakly, realizing he couldn't tough this out. "Maybe you're right." Vex and Krill volunteered to accompany him. As they helped Max through the corridor, his legs grew increasingly wobbly. The medical bay was 2 levels up, and by the time they reached the lift, Max was leaning heavily on Vex's shoulder. "Your body temperature seems elevated," Krill noted, his sensitive scales detecting the heat radiating from Max. "Humans run hot normally," Max gasped, "but yeah, this isn't normal." The medical bay doors slid open automatically, revealing a pristine white room filled with advanced equipment designed to treat multiple species. Dr. Alara, the head physician, was a Keelian, a species renowned for their medical aptitude due to their ability to see bioelectric fields. She looked like a tall, willowy human, except for her silver skin and the fine network of luminescent lines running across her body. "What seems to be the problem?" she asked, guiding Max to an examination table. "He consumed 4 raw avian reproductive modules in quick succession," Vex explained before Max could answer. Dr. Alara's expression shifted to concern. "Chicken eggs? Raw?" Max nodded miserably, now regretting his bravado. "Why would you do that?" the doctor asked, running a scanner over his abdomen. "The other students were making fun of his food container and its contents," Krill explained. "He demonstrated human digestive capabilities as a response." The doctor sighed. "A classic case of interspecies 1 upmanship. I see this at least once a semester." She studied the readings on her scanner. "You're experiencing a reaction, but it's not salmonella, thankfully. The eggs are treated for that. However, your body is struggling to process that much raw protein and fat at once." She pressed a hypospray against Max's arm, and he felt a cool sensation spread through his veins. "This will help with the nausea and stabilize your digestive processes. You should rest here for the next few hours while it takes effect." Max closed his eyes as the medication began to work. "I guess I wasn't as tough as I thought." "Every species has limitations," Dr. Alara said kindly. "Even humans." Vex and Krill stayed with Max until the worst of his symptoms subsided. As they sat beside his bed, their earlier mockery seemed distant and childish. "I'm curious," Vex said quietly. "Do humans really consume living bacteria intentionally?" Max, feeling better but still weak, nodded. "Yeah, we do. Our digestive systems work in partnership with certain microorganisms. We call it our gut biome." "Fascinating," Krill murmured. "Our species sterilizes all food before consumption. The idea of intentionally introducing microorganisms seems radical." "Different evolutionary paths," Max said, quoting Professor Zoltar. "That's why this exchange program exists, right? To understand those differences." The conversation flowed more naturally after that, with genuine questions rather than mockery. Max learned that Zorlaxians absorbed minerals directly through specialized patches on their skin, explaining why they didn't need to eat as frequently as humans. Neptilians like krill could photosynthesize part of their energy requirements through their scales when exposed to certain light wavelengths. By evening, Max was feeling well enough to be discharged with strict instructions to stick to the meal plan designed for humans. "And perhaps avoid raw protein displays in the future," Dr. Alara added with a knowing smile. The next morning, Max entered the cafeteria with some trepidation, wondering if he would now be known as the weird egg-drinking human. Instead, he found Vex and Krill saving him a seat at their table. "We were discussing digestive evolution," Krill said as Max sat down. "Would you mind sharing more about human practices?" Max opened his lunchbox, the same one that had been mocked the day before, revealing a properly cooked breakfast. "I'd be happy to, as long as we can learn about your species, too." What followed was a genuine exchange of information. Other students joined them, curious rather than judgmental. Max explained human dietary requirements and cultural food practices while learning about the fascinating adaptations other species had developed. By the end of the week, the Lunchbox incident had transformed from a source of mockery into a catalyst for cultural exchange. Professor Zoltar even incorporated it into his lectures, using it as an example of how biological differences could lead to greater understanding rather than division. 1 month later, Max sat in the cafeteria surrounded by friends from 6 different planets. His lunchbox now contained a variety of foods, some Earth dishes he'd prepared in the communal kitchen, along with samples from other worlds that were safe for human consumption. "I brought something special today," Max announced, opening a sealed container. Inside were small cups of yogurt he'd made using cultures from Earth and milk substitutes available on the station. "Living bacteria?" Triz asked, both fascinated and horrified. "Perfectly safe," Max assured him, "and really good for humans. Who wants to learn how it's made?" As he demonstrated the process, Max realized how much had changed since that day he'd impulsively chugged raw eggs. What began as a moment of defiance had evolved into something more important, a bridge between different biological worlds. Vex cautiously sampled a tiny amount of yogurt, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly as he analyzed the taste. "It's not unpleasant. Strange, but interesting." Max smiled. "That's how I feel about most things here. Strange, but interesting." Later that day, Professor Zoltar pulled Max aside after class. "Mr. Holloway, I want to commend you on your efforts toward interspecies understanding. Your, shall we say, dramatic demonstration with the eggs has had unexpected positive outcomes." "I still feel a bit embarrassed about that," Max admitted. "Don't be," the professor said, his tentacles forming what Max had learned was a gesture of approval. "The Academy has asked me to propose an official cultural exchange program based on dietary practices. Would you be interested in leading the human food section?" Max felt a surge of pride. "I'd be honored, Professor." "Excellent. We'll begin next week. Oh, and please no raw egg demonstrations this time." They both laughed, the sound of human amusement blending with the professor's bubbling Zoltarian equivalent. Over the following months, Max's status at the Academy evolved from the odd human to interspecies dietary expert. Students from all worlds sought his advice on Earth foods they might safely try, and he in turn became adept at identifying alien foods that humans could digest. The lunchbox that had once been mocked became a symbol of cultural exchange, often containing carefully labeled samples for classmates to examine or taste. Max even added special compartments for different temperature requirements and chemical separations to maintain food safety. One day, nearly 6 months after the egg incident, Vex approached Max with an unusual request. "My family is visiting the station next week," he said, all 4 eyes focused intently. "They are interested in meeting the human who changed their son's perspective on interspecies relations." "They want to meet me?" Max was surprised. Zorlaxian families were known for their privacy and rarely engaged with other species socially. "Yes. Would you join us for a meal? We would prepare food safe for your consumption, of course." Max felt honored by the invitation. "I'd love to. Should I bring something? Perhaps something representative of Earth culture, but please." Vex's mouth parts twitched in what Max now recognized as humor. "No raw eggs." The dinner with Vex's family proved to be a turning point. Max brought carefully prepared Earth dishes that accommodated Zorlaxian dietary restrictions. Vex's parents, initially formal and reserved, became increasingly engaged as the meal progressed. "Your species has adapted to consume such a wide variety of substances," Vex's father commented, examining a piece of bread with his 4 eyes. "It speaks to your evolutionary resilience." "We had to be adaptable," Max explained. "Earth has extreme climate variations and shifting food sources. Humans who could eat diverse food survived better than specialists. A valuable trait for space exploration, Vex's mother noted. Perhaps this is why humans have expanded their presence so quickly, despite your relatively recent development of faster-than-light travel. The conversation continued long into the night, covering topics far beyond food. By the time Max left, he felt a genuine connection with Vex's family, something he hadn't thought possible when he first arrived at the Academy. Word of the successful dinner spread quickly through the Academy's communication networks. Soon, other families visiting the station requested similar cultural exchanges with Max. What had begun as mockery of his lunchbox had somehow transformed him into an unofficial ambassador for humanity. Professor Zaltar formalized this role by creating an interspecies cultural ambassador position within the Academy structure, with Max as its first appointee. The job involved helping new students adjust to the multicultural environment and facilitating understanding between different species. Near the end of the academic year, Max received a message from Earth. The Interstellar Educational Exchange Committee was impressed by reports of his work at Galactic Academy and wanted him to help develop a curriculum for future human exchange students. They want to use the Lunchbox incident as a case study, Max told his friends, laughing at the irony. Apparently, my moment of poor judgment is going to be taught to future generations. It wasn't poor judgment, Krill argued, his scales shimmering with emphasis. It was a perfect demonstration of how biological differences can lead to greater understanding instead of conflict. Speaking of demonstrations, Triz interjected, the first-year students have a request. They've heard the story of the egg-drinking human, and they're curious if you might recreate the moment for educational purposes. Max groaned. I've become a sideshow attraction. Not at all, Vex assured him. You've become a legend. There's a difference. After some persuasion, Max agreed to a formal presentation on human dietary capabilities, including a carefully monitored demonstration of egg consumption. This time, however, he worked with Dr. Alara to ensure it was done safely. The presentation hall was packed with students from all years and faculty from multiple departments. Even the Academy's director, a rarely seen quantumite who existed partially in another dimension, made an appearance. Max stood on the stage feeling nervous but proud. Beside him were tables displaying the wide variety of foods humans could consume from every continent on Earth, and in the center, a small bowl of eggs. Before I begin, Max said, addressing the diverse audience, I want to clarify that what started as a moment of defiance has become something much more important. These past months have taught me that our biological differences, rather than dividing us, can bring us together through curiosity and respect. Professor Zaltar's tentacles waved in approval from the front row. Now, about those eggs, Max continued, picking one up. Humans can indeed consume these raw, though we usually don't for safety reasons. Today's demonstration uses eggs specifically treated to eliminate any risk, and I'll be consuming just one, not 4 like last time. Laughter rippled through the audience. Max cracked the egg expertly and swallowed the contents in one smooth motion. The crowd erupted in applause and various species-specific sounds of appreciation. What followed was a comprehensive presentation on human digestive capabilities, interspersed with stories of his experiences at the Academy. Max concluded by inviting representatives from other species to share their own unique biological adaptations, turning the event into a true interspecies exchange. Afterward, as students and faculty mingled, sampling foods from multiple worlds, the Academy's director approached Max. Up close, the quantumite appeared as a shimmering outline of humanoid form, constantly shifting slightly out of phase with normal space-time. Mr. Holloway, the director said, her voice seeming to come from multiple locations simultaneously, your contribution to interspecies relations has been remarkable. The board has decided to establish a permanent cultural adaptation center based on your work here." Max felt overwhelmed by the honor. "Thank you, Director. I never imagined that drinking eggs would lead to something like this." "The universe often works in unexpected ways," the director replied, her form flickering slightly. "Small moments can cascade into significant changes. Your willingness to bridge differences rather than emphasize them is exactly what the galactic community needs more of." As the academic year drew to a close, Max packed his belongings for the journey back to Earth. His plain metal lunchbox, now covered in signatures and messages from friends of various species, sat on his desk, a symbol of how far he had come. Vex, Krill, and several other friends gathered in his quarters to say goodbye. "You must return next year," Vex insisted, all four eyes blinking emphatically. "Who else will drink strange substances for our entertainment?" Max laughed. "I've been invited back as an assistant to Professor Zoltar, so you'll definitely see me again." Krill handed Max a small package. "We created this for you, a reminder of your time here." Inside was a new lunchbox, but unlike any Max had seen before. It was constructed from materials from all 17 planets represented at the Academy, with special compartments designed for foods from every world. Engraved on the lid in multiple languages was a simple message: "Breaking barriers, one meal at a time." "This is incredible," Max said, genuinely moved by the gift. "It has temperature-controlled sections," Triz explained proudly, "and built-in analyzers to ensure food safety across species." Max ran his fingers over the beautiful creation, thinking about how far they had all come from that first tense lunch. "I don't know what to say, thank you all." As they said their goodbyes, Max reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. When he first arrived at Galactic Academy, he had felt isolated and alien, the lone human in a sea of unfamiliar life forms. Now, he was returning to Earth with friendships that spanned the galaxy, and a new understanding of what it meant to be human among the stars. On his last morning at the station, Max entered the cafeteria one final time. To his surprise, every table was occupied by students and faculty, all waiting for him. As he walked in, they stood in unison, a gesture of respect that transcended species. Professor Zoltar moved forward. "Mr. Holloway, we couldn't let you leave without a proper farewell. Everyone here has brought a food item from their world that is safe for human consumption. We invite you to sample the galaxy before your departure." Max looked at the incredible spread of foods from worlds he had only read about in textbooks. Some glowed with bioluminescence, others hovered slightly above their plates due to low-density molecular structures, and still others changed colors in response to ambient temperature. "This is overwhelming," Max said, genuinely touched. "Less overwhelming than drinking 4 raw eggs in succession, I assure you," the professor replied, generating laughs from everyone familiar with the story. As Max sampled foods from across the galaxy, he realized how profoundly this experience had changed him. What began as an impulsive act of defiance had transformed into a journey of discovery and connection. His lunchbox, once a source of mockery, had become a symbol of interspecies understanding. When the time came to board the transport ship back to Earth, Max carried with him not just souvenirs and memories, but a new purpose. He would return to Galactic Academy, not just as a student or assistant, but as someone committed to building bridges between worlds. And it had all started with some eggs and a lunchbox. As the transport pulled away from the station, Max watched the magnificent structure recede into the starfield. In his lap sat both lunchboxes, the old one that had started everything, and the new one that symbolized how far he had come. Inside the old one, carefully packed for the journey home, were 6 eggs. Not for drinking this time, but as a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful connections begin with the most unexpected actions. Max smiled to himself as the ship accelerated to light speed, carrying him back to Earth and the next chapter of his interstellar journey. He had come to Galactic Academy to learn about alien cultures, but it ended up teaching them something about humanity instead. And in doing so, he had discovered what it truly meant to be human in a universe filled with differences, differences that, when approached with openness rather than fear, could transform from barriers into bridges,